You're 45 years old, maybe 50, and you just did the math in your head, didn't you? You looked at your bank account, you looked at your age, and some cold, honest part of your brain whispered the sentence you've been avoiding for years. It's too late for me. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second, because I've heard it more times than I can count, from people sitting exactly where you're sitting right now. Successful people, smart people, people who raised kids, paid mortgages, survived layoffs, survived divorces, survived everything life threw at them, and somehow still ended up here in their 40s or 50s with little or nothing set aside for the day they can't work anymore. Here's what nobody tells you. That sentence, "it's too late," is not a fact, it's a feeling. And feelings, when it comes to money, are usually wrong. I'm going to show you exactly how someone starting from zero at 45, 50, even 55 can build real, functioning retirement security in 10 years. Not a fantasy, not a guarantee. A plan built on math that actually works, using tools that already exist, that almost nobody uses correctly. But before I show you the plan, I need to show you why you're behind in the first place. Because if you skip that part, you'll repeat it, even with everything I'm about to teach you. Let's start with Karen. Karen is 51. She's a school administrator in Ohio. She makes $72,000 a year. She has $11,000 in a retirement account that her employer started for her almost by accident, and she hasn't touched it, hasn't added to it, hasn't looked at it in 6 years. Karen isn't lazy. Karen isn't stupid. Karen raised 2 kids, mostly on her own after her divorce. She paid off a car. She helped her mother with medical bills. Every dollar she ever had went somewhere important. That's the part people miss. Most people who arrive at 45 or 50 with nothing saved didn't waste their money. They spent it keeping their lives together. So when Karen looks at her retirement account and sees $11,000, she doesn't feel behind. She feels finished. She assumes the window has already closed. Here's what Karen doesn't know yet. And here's what you might not know either. The reason people feel like it's too late isn't math. It's a myth. And that myth has a name. It's the idea that wealth only comes from starting early. That compounding only rewards the young. That if you didn't start at 25, the door is shut. That belief is only half true, and the half that's false is about to change everything for you. Let me show you something. Imagine 2 people. Person A starts investing $300 a month at age 25. Person B starts investing the exact same $300 a month at age 45. Both earn an average annual return of 8%. And I want to be honest with you right now. 8% is a historical long-term average for a diversified stock portfolio. It's not a promise. Some years you'll see 20% gains, some years you'll see 15% losses. That's just how markets actually behave. By 65, person A, who started at 25, has contributed $144,000 of their own money. But because that money had 40 years to grow, the account is worth somewhere around $1,040,000. Person B, who started at 45, only had 20 years to grow the same monthly amount. Their account lands around $176,000. Same monthly contribution, 6 times the difference. That's the number that breaks people's hearts when they see it. That's the number that makes people close the laptop and give up. But you're reading that number wrong. Person B didn't fail. Person B still turned $54,000 of contributions into $176,000. That's not nothing. That's money doing exactly what money is supposed to do. The problem was never that starting late doesn't work. The problem is that person B used a 25-year-old's strategy. And that's the mistake almost everyone makes when they start late. They save the way a young person saves small amounts. Low intensity, something is better than nothing, and then they're shocked when it produces a young person's early years results instead of a retirement. Starting late doesn't mean lowering your expectations. It means changing your entire strategy. And that's the part almost nobody explains to you. If you're realizing right now that you've been quietly comparing your financial timeline to someone else's and it's been convincing you that you're already out of the race, subscribe. Because that exact kind of thinking is what we spend our time undoing here. One honest number at a time. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the strategy that actually works for someone starting late isn't really about the market at all. It's about something most people never even look at. Meet David. David is 51, a mechanic outside Columbus, makes $68,000 a year. Like Karen, he has almost nothing saved. When David first heard he'd need to save close to a third of his income to have any real shot at this, his gut reaction was probably the same as yours right now. There's no way. I can't live on that. So David did what most people do. He looked for the number in his budget he could cut without noticing. He found nothing. Groceries, gas, the mortgage, nothing obvious to trim. For about 3 weeks, David assumed this whole thing simply wasn't built for someone like him. Then his daughter asked to borrow his truck for the weekend, and David spent 10 minutes walking her through the loan paperwork so she'd understand what she was co-signing. Somewhere in that conversation, explaining his own truck payment out loud to his kid, he heard himself say something he'd never actually said before. I don't really need a truck this nice. I just liked how it looked in the lot. That sentence is the whole story, not the truck, the sentence. Because most of what's quietly draining people your age isn't laziness or bad luck. It's 20 years of small decisions that felt harmless in the moment and never once got revisited. A truck payment on something nicer than he needed. Streaming subscriptions he hadn't opened in months. A storage unit, $110 a month. Holding furniture from an apartment he moved out of 3 years ago. None of it made David happier. It was just there. Quiet, automatic. Invisible. The way a leak in a pipe is invisible until someone finally looks behind the wall. When David finally looked, he found $940 a month he wasn't using to improve his life in any way at all. He redirected every dollar of it. Combined with what he was already contributing, David was suddenly investing over $1,600 a month. And he didn't feel poorer. He felt like he'd found money that had been his the whole time. That's the first real lesson, and it has nothing to do with picking stocks. There is no clever investment trick that replaces an honest look at your own life. I wish there were. There isn't. But David's story has a second half. And this is where most videos like this one stop too early. 6 months into his new plan, David's transmission failed. $2,200 gone in a week. And here's exactly the moment where people quit. Not because the math stopped working, the math never stopped working, but because the emergency feels like proof. Proof that the old story was right all along. See, something always comes up. It really is too late for me. David almost believed it too. He told me later he sat in his truck outside the repair shop and thought about canceling his automatic transfer that month, just to catch his breath, just this once. He didn't cancel it. He paused it for exactly 1 month, covered the repair, and turned it back on. 1 month. Not a collapse, a pause. That's the difference between the people who build this and the people who don't. It was never about never having a hard month. It's about refusing to let one hard month write the ending of a 10-year story. Now, if you're 50 or older, there's something built directly into the tax code that most people your age have never even heard of, and it exists specifically for this situation. For 2026, the IRS lets anyone 50 or older add an extra $8,000 a year into their 401k on top of the regular limit, bringing the total someone 50 and up can put into $32,500 for the year. And if you happen to be 60, 61, 62, or 63 specifically, the rules get even more generous. That narrow 4-year window allows an even larger catch-up of $11,250 instead of the standard $8,000, which brings your total possible contribution up to $35,750 in a single year if your plan allows it. That's not a typo, and it's not a loophole. It's the tax code openly admitting that some people need to accelerate later in life, and building a legal, direct path to do exactly that. Most people who feel behind have never even heard the phrase catch-up contribution. They assume the rules are identical for everyone at every age. They're not. Those rules were written with someone exactly like you in mind, and almost nobody uses them. So let's actually answer the question you came here for, not David's number. Yours, because retire in 10 years means something completely different depending on how you actually plan to live, and most videos never let you do this math for yourself. So let's do it together, right now. A commonly used starting guideline among financial planners is that you can typically withdraw somewhere around 4% of your invested savings each year, adjusted for inflation, with a reasonable chance it lasts for a long retirement. It's not a law of physics. Some years the real safe number turns out closer to 3.5%. Some retirees can safely take more. And it depends heavily on your specific portfolio and how the market behaves in your particular 10-year window. But it's a useful starting ruler, so let's use it. If you want $30,000 a year to live on, that guideline suggests you'd eventually want somewhere around $750,000 invested, fully funding that lifestyle from your portfolio alone. If your number is $40,000 a year, the same math points to roughly $1 million. If it's $50,000 a year, you're looking at somewhere around $1,250,000. I can already feel some of you doing the same thing Karen did when she first saw a number like that. Panicking, assuming it's impossible in 10 years. And if investments were the only piece of this puzzle, you might be right to worry. But investments were never the only piece. That's the mistake almost everyone makes when they picture retirement. They picture one giant number sitting in one account, doing all the work by itself. Here's the part that changes everything. Social Security is currently projected to remain a major source of retirement income for most workers, though future benefit levels and program rules can always change with future legislation. For most people who worked and paid into the system for years, it currently covers a meaningful chunk of that number before your investments ever have to lift a finger. Your exact benefit depends entirely on your own earnings history. So the only number that actually matters is the personalized estimate sitting in your account at ssa.gov, which takes about 5 minutes to check and which I genuinely ask you to pause and go look at this week. But for the sake of walking through the math, let's say your statement shows something like $20,000 a year starting at your full retirement age, which for almost everyone under 65 today, born 1960 or later, is age 67. Claim earlier at 62, and that same benefit is permanently reduced by roughly 30%. Wait past 67, and it keeps growing instead. So go back to that $30,000 lifestyle. If Social Security is already covering $20,000 of it, your investments don't need to fund $30,000 a year anymore. They only need to fund the $10,000 gap. Run that same 4% guideline on $10,000 instead of $30,000. And suddenly, the target isn't $750,000, it's closer to $250,000. Do the same thing with the $40,000 lifestyle. $20,000 gap after Social Security. Roughly $500,000 needed from investments, not $1 million. And the $50,000 lifestyle. $30,000 gap. Roughly $750,000, not $1,250,000. Look at what just happened to your number. It didn't move because I found you a better investment. It moved because you finally saw the whole picture instead of one piece of it. And there's a third piece most people don't even count. If part of your plan includes working part-time in your 60s, even 10 or 15 hours a week doing something you don't hate, $10,000 a year of part-time income shrinks that same gap by another $250,000 off the investment target using that same rough math. Suddenly, a impossible $1 million goal can become a genuinely realistic $250,000 goal once Social Security and a little flexible income are actually sitting at the table with you. This is why David's $276,000, which I'm about to walk you through, isn't a consolation prize. For someone planning a modest, honest, $30,000 lifestyle with Social Security doing real work alongside it, that number puts him remarkably close to actually finished. Not because he got lucky, because he did the math instead of avoiding it. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second, though, before we get to David's actual number. What if the plan isn't only about spending less? Angela is 53, worked as a receptionist for 18 years, made $41,000 a year, and had made peace with the idea that her income was simply fixed. The way weather is fixed, something that happens to you, not something you decide. Then a coworker mentioned she'd gotten a raise, moving into medical billing after a 4-month certification course. Mostly self-paced, mostly free, with a $200 exam fee at the end. Angela almost didn't apply. She figured she was too old to start something new. She applied anyway, mostly to prove to herself that she could finish something. 4 months later, Angela's new role pays $58,000 a year, $17,000 more every single year for the rest of her working life. Invested consistently over 10 years, that one decision alone can realistically add well over $200,000 to her retirement, stacked on top of everything else she's already saving, and it shrinks her own personal gap, the exact same way Social Security shrunk David's. I'm not telling you to quit your job or start a business tomorrow. For most people starting late, that's actually too risky a move to make the centerpiece of a 10-year plan. I'm asking something smaller. Is there one certification, one skill, one promotion sitting right in front of you, using something you already half know, that could move your income in the next 12 months? Angela didn't reinvent her life. She learned one specific, valuable thing. Now here's the part where I have to slow down and be honest with you, because I don't want to oversell any of this. If you're trying to compress what would normally take 20 or 30 years of steady building into roughly a 10-year window, your savings rate usually has to become significantly more aggressive than what most financial advice assumes. I'm not going to hand you a magic percentage and pretend it applies to your exact life, because it doesn't. Someone with a paid-off house and no dependents is in a completely different position than someone still supporting kids in college. What I can tell you is this: the intensity has to go up. There's no version of this plan where it doesn't. And I want to be equally honest about something else. Every number I've walked you through, the 4% guideline, the 8% average return, David's Social Security estimate, these are illustrations built to help you understand how the pieces fit together, not a prediction of your own future. Markets can underperform for a decade at a time. Rules around Social Security and catch-up contributions can change with future legislation. Full, complete, permanent retirement in 10 years, starting from absolute zero at 45, is going to depend heavily on your specific income, expenses, and health. Nobody, including me, can guarantee you a number. What this combination of levers can do: an aggressive savings rate, catch-up contributions built for your exact age, Social Security doing part of the work, and even a modest income increase, is take something that looks mathematically impossible on paper and turn it into something genuinely, realistically achievable for a lot of people in your position. But there's something else in this story that isn't financial at all. and it might matter more than any number I've given you so far. When Karen finally sat down and ran her real numbers, she discovered something that surprised her. Full traditional retirement at 67, doing nothing, sitting at home, wasn't actually the goal that mattered to her. What she wanted was freedom from her current job, specifically the one with the impossible boss and the 2-hour commute. She wanted the choice to work if she felt like it, not because she had to. That's a different target than retire completely, and it's a target that's dramatically more within reach in 10 years. For a lot of people starting late, the real goal isn't never working another day in your life. It's financial independence, with flexibility enough invested that work becomes optional instead of mandatory. Enough that a bad year at your job doesn't threaten your entire future. Enough that you're choosing your next chapter instead of being forced into it. Let's go back to David one more time, because I want you to see this in real numbers, not abstractions. At 51, David redirects $1,600 a month into retirement accounts, using catch-up contribution room now that he's over 50. I want to be precise about what comes next, because it matters. Under a 7% annual return illustration, historically reasonable for a diversified portfolio, but not a promise for any specific 10-year stretch, because markets absolutely can have bad decades. David's account would be around $276,000 after 10 years. Remember his own gap number from a minute ago, roughly $250,000 needed from investments for a modest $30,000 lifestyle once Social Security does its share. David's $276,000 doesn't just approach that number, it clears it. Add a mortgage that's paid off 2 years early because he redirected part of a work bonus toward the principal instead of only investing it. And David isn't looking at a mansion on a beach somewhere. He's looking at something better. He's looking at choice. The choice to keep working if he wants to, the choice to walk away if he doesn't. The choice to finally say no to a job that's making him miserable, because for the first time in his adult life, he isn't financially trapped inside it. That's what this was actually about the entire time. It was never about hitting a magic number pulled from thin air. It's about finding your actual number, the real one built from your real life, and then closing that specific gap on purpose. And it's about removing one word from your future: trapped. And here's the thing almost nobody says out loud about people who fail at this. The ones who start at 45 or 50 and end up right back where they started 10 years later, exactly the same, they don't usually fail because the math couldn't work. I just showed you how the pieces fit together. The math can work if the assumptions, the savings rate, the timeline, and the actual retirement spending line up the way you planned. Nobody can promise you that they will. But the point was never that retirement is guaranteed. The point is that starting late isn't the same thing as starting hopelessly. They fail in a specific month, usually somewhere between month 4 and month 9. Something breaks a transmission, a family emergency, a rough stretch at work, and instead of treating it like weather, like something that simply happens sometimes, they treat it like a verdict. Proof the old sentence was true all along. See, I told you it was too late for me. David almost believed that sentence too, sitting in his truck outside that repair shop. The only difference between David and the people who quit for good is that David paused for a month instead of stopping for a decade. Don't let a hard month prove an old fear right. A hard month is not a verdict on the rest of your life. It's just a hard month. So picture 2 versions of 10 years from now, because both of them are coming whether you decide anything today or not. In the first one, nothing changes. Same accounts, roughly the same balance. Same fear, maybe a little quieter by now, but still there. still whispering the same 4 words it's been whispering for years. Except now, you're 55 or 60 instead of 45, and the window in front of you is smaller than it is right now, tonight, while you're watching this. In the second one, you're the same age either way. That part happens no matter what you choose. But this version of you found the $940 hiding in plain sight, knew their own real number instead of fearing an imaginary one, used the catch-up contributions the tax code built with your exact age in mind, learned one skill that moved the needle, the way Angela did, paused for a month when life got hard instead of quitting for good. And 10 years from now, this version of you wakes up on an ordinary Tuesday and realizes almost by accident that the decision you made tonight, the one that felt small, felt late, felt maybe even a little foolish, quietly became the moment everything else was built on top of. Karen is still working on her plan. David is 2 years in, and his account has already grown past what he once thought was impossible for someone his age. Angela just finished her second certification. None of them are retired yet. That was never the point of telling you their stories. The point is that a year ago, all 3 of them believed completely that it was too late. Today, not one of them believes that anymore. Something as ordinary as an honest look at a bank statement was the whole beginning. If some part of you just decided right now that you're not going to spend the next 10 years the way you spent the last 10 comment, I'm starting now. I read every one. 10 years is coming either way. That part was never up for negotiation. The only thing that was ever actually up to you is who's sitting here when it arrives. Subscribe, and I'll walk you through the next piece of this with you.